So you have made a really interesting transition from software engineering and robotics to starting a drug discovery company. I'm curious, as you've made that transition, like what's been most surprising to you personally?
Yeah, that's a very good question. One thing that I would say, especially as someone that's technical, as an engineer, it's very easy for technical people like myself to fall into this one trap when you're thinking about an idea or when you're running a company, to think in terms of solutions and problems, right? I think it just feels more comfortable when all you've done is train yourself on solving problems. And so that can be a bit of a trap because you start thinking, what is this cool, interesting, technical problem that I can work on? And then given that, what's this cool, interesting solution that I can come up with? And a great company is so much more than that. By all means, start with that as your path if you would like. But, great science is not enough for a great company. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's table stakes. And so for me, it was really learning that. It's too easy to just fall into that really comfortable trap of problem, I'm gonna make a solution. Here's the problem, I'm gonna make a solution. No, what is the wider ecosystem here? What does the FDA think? What are my potential partners? What are the market dynamics of the problem that I'm actually trying to solve? What do investors actually want in this space? How do I, again, have this grand vision, and how do I hit these intermediate inflection points to get there? And so that was, I would say, my greatest lesson. It's not all about the problem. In fact, the cool problem is really one out of hundreds of different things that you have to think about.
Out of all those 100 questions, is there any one that you had to solve that was a particular source of stress along the way?
I think initially, it's easy for us to go back to the things that we're familiar with. Yeah. And so when I'm not doing engineering, nowadays, I spend maybe 1% to 2% of my time engineering if I'm lucky. And I think in the very early days when I was doing everything else, the market research, helping come up with a plan with my co-founder, we were just talking about even just target selection. What targets should we try to prime given the ADCs and RLTs that exist there and whether heterogeneity is actually an issue? It just felt like, am I even an engineer anymore? Who am I? And so it started off being anything that was not something I was comfortable with. Right. But I think one thing that really helped with me, for me, was really removing myself from, again, that trap of falling in love with a technical problem. Right. I think the right thing to do is to kind of make yourself fall in love with the task of understanding the entire ecosystem in which your solution lives in. And that itself, if you can kind of trick yourself into thinking that this is itself a cool, interesting problem, then I think that becomes a motivator too. And it's true, it's a massively complex system. We're not just trying to make robots. We are trying to find a path that allows us to make priming therapies that work with development timelines that actually feel rational, with a regulatory path that makes sense for the FDA, with something that actually creates a value add for people that are making ADCs and RLTs, and importantly, first and foremost, actually helps patients, and is something that is fundable, that's interesting to investors. And if you think of all of that as a network, this big graph with all these nodes, it's just a question of how do I get this to a Pareto-ish optimal state to get all stakeholders kind of happy-ish enough so that I can finally get to my grand goal of just making better therapies for cancer.